I'm back. But my name is Kathy. I'm here with my awesome panelists for this next panel about the evolution of collegiate. So we are excited to basically tell you the history lesson of esports at the collegiate level. So I do want to start off with a couple introductions. We have Steve Jaworski joining us a little later, I believe. But to start things off, can everyone just kind of introduce yourselves? What is your name, your title, and your role during collegiate esports? Let's start off with Garvey.
Hi, I'm Garvey. I'm the Director of Student and Education Programs for Twitch. I founded the Twitch student program in 2015. Got my start in the gaming and esports by being a competitive Magic the Gathering player in 1994. 1994, you didn't hear it wrong.
Awesome.
Cool.
Duran?
Duran Parsi. I'm the director of collegiate at Face It, just recently started actually, and I got my start in collegiate esports by founding CSL in 2009, which was the first ever collegiate esports organization.
Looks like Jaws is joining us, but Carmen, go for it.
Okay, hi, I'm Carmen Lam, and in 2012 I co-founded the UBC Esports Association. My focus in the club was on marketing, event operations, corporate sponsorships, public relationships, and team management. After graduating, I managed our team for another 3 years, and that was my role during my time in collegiate.
Yeah, and just briefly, in case people weren't here for the last panel, my name's Kathy. I'm just moderating today. I am the assistant director at UCI Esports and roughly started the same time as Carmen. So we have all of us here from, 1994 to starting in about like 2011 and so. So yeah, quite a long time. So let's start the first question off. So everyone in this chat has left or is in the process of leaving a legacy behind in collegiate. You might not be in collegiate right now, but people probably know you. So where would you place yourself in the ecosystem when it came to the origin or kind of like the Wild West times of collegiate esports? And what do you think the legacy that you've left behind is? And let's do the same order chronological, please.
Great. So I think where I feel I sit is in the service of. So all I really do is listen a lot. Listen to administrators, listen to professors, listen to students, listen to my team. And then from there, I execute. So I don't like to guess. So that's really my role. I like to be in the service of. If there's something that needs to be done, just let me know.
Yeah, on my side, I think I guess I see the legacy that I've left as being sort of where collegiate esports is today to a certain extent, or at least I feel like I've had some part in contributing to where things are right now. And I think similar to Garvey, I'm really into just providing a service and support to people that are sort of younger than me, A, and B, like active student leaders currently. Obviously, I'm out of school now. So from my perspective, I want to use my platform to be a service to people who are currently sort of doing really awesome things in the space.
Oh, we don't hear Jaws.
Yep, Jaws muted.
So for everyone,
Got him.
I'll go next.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Where would I place myself in the ecosystem? In the very center? No, I'm just kidding. This is a bit of a hard one for me to pinpoint, I feel, because I was a little bit everywhere from the beginning to even 3 years later. So all in all, I think my goal for collegiate was always to expand our limits and boundaries beyond the campus and exceed people's expectations of what collegiate could accomplish. And I tried to do that in every way that I could with UBC Esports. I was organizing huge events that school administration and students have never experienced before. And because I was doing all that, I also worked with organizers from Riot and TESPA to help them understand what collegiate space was about so that they could build a supportive collegiate program for us. And I was always trying to pull more resources from all those areas so that we could raise the quality of our events and teams. And for my legacy, I guess I feel like I've pushed others to do the same after I've done that. I hear from a lot of other schools and industry professionals that they see UBC as a role model school in collegiate esports. So that makes me really happy to hear.
No, I can't hear Jaws yet.
Nothing from Jaws yet.
No.
So, Jaws, keep talking. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make pretend I know what you're saying and just word it for you.
We can do a lip syncing thing where Jaws goes and we interpret. We can do interpretive dance based on what he's.
So maybe I can talk a little bit about my experience with Jaws while he's fixing that. I met Jaws back in 2013, I believe, and he was already doing collegiate esports. I had met him because I was working with TESPA at the time, it was Texas Esports Association, and I went to the first 2 Lone Star clashes, and everybody told me that I have to talk to Jaws. So he's an OG. He's been an old school supporter of students, and he has a lot of love for the scene, really does.
Yeah, just a quick add on the Jaws side, not to speak for Jaws, but obviously Jaws was pretty much like the key figure in establishing Collegiate League of Legends, which was the first publisher to officially support collegiate esports. So I think, that's a pretty significant legacy for sure. So there's some Jaws tidbits.
Yeah, I also met Jaws around 2012, 2013. Met in person at PAX when LCS was still there. He invited a group of UBC esports members there, and we met up, and he was really cool, really welcoming, very open to feedback all the time. At that time, Riot was just planning out their collegiate program. It was in a beta phase, and so we talked a lot about what we need as student leaders, as club members, and he really pulled through for all that.
Yeah, I think honestly everyone in collegiate has a story with Jaws, so hopefully we can get his audio, his mic working soon, and he'll just jump right back in when we're ready for him. But to keep things moving for now, I wanted to ask a little bit more about kind of the origins of collegiate, which we've started talking about. But I would say we are essentially the first and second generation of collegiate esports. I don't know where we're at right now, maybe the 4th, 5th, or 6th, but it's been around for a long time, and the ecosystem constantly evolves. So I wanted to ask you all about, especially with the rapid growth, I would say starting around 2013 to 15, it really started to explode, especially with varsity programs jumping on board, big events taking off, and all sorts of things. Can you speak to Carmen as being a collegiate leader during that time? What was that like, and what were some of the biggest accomplishments, but also maybe some mistakes that you made along the way, being one of the very first?
I've made many mistakes. There just wasn't enough time to do everything and fix all the mistakes. So in my case, I felt like my mistakes happened because I was the first and I wasn't fully aware of all that I was doing and all that I wasn't doing. I prioritize a lot of things like marketing, events, competitive teams, and maybe there's like a 4th, 5th thing on the list that I could spend time on doing, but everything else on the list, I didn't have time to do. And the stuff I did do, we saw a lot of success in, and unfortunately, we didn't have enough time to take care of other things, and I didn't even have the awareness and the mental capacity to realize sooner that we should have delegated a lot of things to other people and train them up to do it, to perform those tasks successfully. So I was focused on way too many things. And my first year starting out UBC Esports was also, unfortunately, my last year as a student. So I didn't get to continue with a lot of what I had done, and I didn't get to cover a lot of my mistakes afterwards. I did continue to manage the team for another 3 years, and I think that's where we shined a lot. A lot of my personal accomplishments came from the competitive space. And yeah, I think when Riot introduced NACC, North American Collegiate Championships, it was called at that time, in 2013 and 2014, that's when Collegiate got really big, because that exposed the scene to a lot of people who didn't know about esports or who didn't know there was a collegiate scene for esports.
Yeah, on my side, for CSL, CSL was the first collegiate league, and so ultimately everything that we were doing had no blueprint. And I think from the standpoint of mistakes, I don't necessarily think there's a lot of things that are mistakes. I think really every time something didn't go well or didn't go as well as I had wanted, it's more so an opportunity to learn and iterate and go better. So I don't necessarily want to call things mistakes. For example, we had our first ever live event was in 2012, and we had never done a live event before, and we had basically every technical problem you could possibly imagine. Like we got a capture card, but it didn't sync with the motherboard, so we couldn't use any of the cameras that we had rented. So we had to come up with solutions and be creative. But for example, that experience helped us improve our live events for future years. So I think the biggest thing is just not having any blueprint to work off of, and sort of shooting in the dark, so to speak, and kind of like, okay, this is cool, like let's do a live event this year, in 2012, and we just did it. And for subsequent years, we're able to improve and improve the experience for ourselves and for the players. But yeah, I think the biggest one is just that there's no roadmap for us to have followed. So it was really just like trying stuff out because, I or someone else at CSL thought that it would be a good idea. And, we're all in favor of trying out things that we think are good ideas and seeing if they work.
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Hey, we did it.
Yes, congrats.
I was going to come right in and say, hey, actually, that was true on both sides, on the Riot side as well. So I'll just do a quick blurb. Hi, I'm Jaws. I launched Riot's collegiate law program back in 2011. Actually worked closely with everybody on this panel. And to kind of jump straight into what y'all were talking about, to what Duran was saying, that was absolutely true on the publisher side as well, because nobody had ever really done a collegiate engagement program. Even when I was doing initial market research for the program that would eventually become collegiate law, there was absolutely no blueprint. The closest was USC did a bunch of Unreal Tournament lands, and they had a pretty high level tournament in terms of Scholastic, but outside of that, it really was StarCraft. There was an incredible grassroots program with StarCraft, so drew a lot of inspiration from that, and I know that's where CSL got its start. But other than that, no publisher had ever really jumped into the fray and tried to directly support students in terms of grassroots communities. So we were all, in a way, kind of just blazing a trail and hoping that we didn't accidentally drive the car off a cliff. And we were very fortunate that despite some of the hiccups along the way and the speed bumps along the way, we were able to really steer things in a positive direction. And despite certain mistakes, like I feel like in general there are so many more opportunities for students now than there were, and that in itself is I see that as a huge win.
Yeah, definitely hard times for everyone to kind of figure things out from scratch, but I think overall we did a really great job. And kind of speaking to that though, about the beginning days and kind of having these expectations and these visions for how the ecosystem would grow, knowing that we were all very motivated and very optimistic. Garvey, if you want to start things off, I'm really curious about how you have seen the ecosystem grow and whether that's matched your expectation and vision. And what are some of the things that have changed? Like we've seen a lot of money come in scene. We've seen a lot of different rules come in play, industry involvement. What are your thoughts? Don't forget to unmute.
Yeah.
I believe the first time I actually sponsored a collegiate event was 2013, and I believe it was for Duran at the roof of the Patterson Automotive Museum in Los Angeles, which was amazing, like really solid. But I think the biggest changes from when I first started supporting collegiate to now is the move from just students being involved and kind of doing their own thing to having official support at the universities. I think that's really exciting. Started in 2014, of course, with our godfather Kurt. He came in. He was, I believe, the director of athletics and soccer for RMU, and he created the first ever varsity scholarship esports program. UCI followed up quickly thereafter. But now these students have some varsity programs, some club sports. They're getting scholarships now. There's curriculum that wrap around it. There's gaming arenas, beautiful, beautiful gaming arenas in UCI, Boise State, Full Sail University in Florida. Just truly, truly professional spaces for the students to play, gather, do some research, apply some skills that they're learning in the classrooms to the esports program. So I think that's the natural evolution I saw, was going from grassroots to at least having some official support by the universities.
Yeah, I'll piggyback off of that. I think like Garvey mentioned, the big one is obviously sort of institutional support at a university level. But one thing that I think has changed really dramatically over the years, especially since I was a student, is esports clubs in general. And I think Carmen pretty much like created the guideline for that, of like how a successful esports club should look on campus. For example, when I was in college, we had a Facebook group, and that was it. And it was UCSD StarCraft, and that's all we did was like meet up at the pizza place and go to the computer lab and play StarCraft, and that was it. But Carmen, for example, established UBC Esports, and it had divisions and it had departments, and it had like a real like formalized structure, and they brought in sponsors, and they had teams, and that were just much more formalized than really anyone had done before. And now, that's the model that most universities esports clubs are following. Rutgers is a great example of a current esports club that's just like really awesome as well. I think from my perspective, that's probably been the biggest shift, in addition to sort of like universities actively supporting esports as well.
Yeah, we're seeing this kind of expansive growth in terms of the people that are involved and the institutions that are involved. And I think right now we are kind of looking back at our experience and seeing how it's evolved. But I think everyone today is still trying to figure out what are the next barriers they're going to break. Because clearly all of us have broken some sort of barriers, whether that's from industry side, the publisher side, the club, tournament running. So what do you see now, just kind of looking at the current scene? What are some of those barriers that you're seeing in the ecosystem, and what is kind of stopping people from taking that next big step? Like, do you have any kind of frustrations with how it's been evolving, and just like knowing your history and your knowledge, what is your kind of advice to everyone?
I think the biggest thing that I am curious to see for the next step in the evolution of the space is sustainability. I think the foundation is laid. For better or worse, the foundation's there, right? We've got a great network of student organizers and student clubs. We've got institutions that are starting to buy in and are very quickly approaching critical mass if they're not there already. But I think the biggest thing that is hampering growth right now is sustainability at a scalable level. And honestly, I think that's on the publishers to figure out. Even in recent months, Riot came out with some pretty heavy restrictions on student organizations and are taking a much more kind of direct hands-on approach, which could work. But at the same time, it also does hamstring the ability for entrepreneurial students and entrepreneurial institutions to grow and create programs. I think that centralization is good to a degree, but at the same time, you have to be able to create scalable sustainability. So students being able to be kind of net zero on an event if they're running an event or something similar to that. And so I think solving the sustainability problem is going to be incredibly important, because a publisher can only prop up a scene for so long before the scene really has to prop itself up. And I think that with a little bit of chaos that comes with a grassroots amateur scene, if you can create cohesion and standards and connective tissue, you can create sustainability while also creating that cohesion that you're looking for traditionally with a top-down approach.
Yeah, I agree with Jaws on that point. I think, the other thing that kind of flows from a very sort of top-down approach is that it creates almost like a crutch where, for example, there's a system in which a student doesn't feel empowered to do things unless it's done by a publisher. So I think that can potentially stunt growth. I think the other thing is just right now in the collegiate space, there are so many different actors, not just leagues and tournaments and events, but publishers, universities, esports clubs, third-party organizations. So there's such a large amount of various different groups that are operating in the space, and I do think the community is large enough to support it. But one of the largest issues right now, in my opinion, is just that there is not a really good sort of like Jaws mentioned, cohesion or line of communication between all these various different actors in the space. So a lot of people are doing a lot of great things, but they're sort of operating in silos. And I think, for the collegiate community to really take another leap forward, there should be some type of better communication system established between sort of all the various different parties to make sure that, bad actors are weeded out, and that the good programs are supported, and that there's a knowledge sharing so that good things can be distributed amongst a wider variety of people, to broaden the net of good and supportive programs at all levels, whether it be tournaments, events, leagues, teams, etc.
I myself see two barriers that I'm trying to remove myself. One is to change the discussion to make it more acceptable for administrators and parents that might not understand it. So I'm trying to change the discussion about esports programs, and I'm trying to talk about the highly valuable and transferable emerging new and digital media skills that you learn through the vehicle of gaming and esports. So I'm trying to change the discussion a little bit to the skills that's inherent in this industry. Yes, we're calling it esports. Yes, we're calling it gaming. To me, it's just a vehicle. It's a medium that engages the students. You meet them where they are, and it becomes a hobby. Education becomes a hobby instead of a chore. So I think that's the first thing that I'm trying to address myself, is just change some of the dialogue, change some of the terminology when we're talking about programs like this. The second barrier I'm seeing is that the industry is a bit hesitant to get involved with students, and that might be for several reasons. To me, I think non-endemics and endemics that might want to work with students might be a little bit afraid of a no delay live setting with no filters or anything with students. So I think what we need to do is, as I'm working with more institutions on curriculum, I have to look at maybe communication classes that might teach media training classes and a brand safety class. This is a big issue throughout the whole industry now, not only for students. Is influencing, micro-influencing is becoming, it has been extremely popular. But how can we make people more comfortable with us? How can we make people more comfortable with working with students? Well, they're accredited in brand safety. They're accredited in media training. They're part of a varsity team, so they're keeping their GPA up. They're a good representative to your brand. So those are the two major blockers that I myself am trying to work on.
I agree with Garvey on educating people on collegiate esports and just esports in general, especially from the club side and working with school administration. At UBC specifically, it's a research institution. It's very much focused on research data, and also a focus on student well-being, mental health, physical health. So when we approached the administration and we were able to talk them through how our events work, how our team works for competitive, then they were able to see that it's not just gaming as an activity. It's social. You pick up skills, you meet people, you do so much more beyond just gaming. And then they were on board with all our events and supporting us after that.
You know, it's really funny that you said it's not just gaming. So part of the process is that for Twitch is we create working backwards documents for any huge program that we want to continue. And it always starts with an article in the future, trying to show like what's the light at the end of the tunnel if we create a program like this. And the first article I wrote in the first working backwards document I did in 2018 was labeled just that. It's not just video games. And we talk about the emerging new and digital media skills that you learn through video games, but you could apply anywhere.
Yeah, I think this common thread that we've also talked about is as things change, the challenges change. And we have to evaluate how we can get both students and institutions kind of like equipped properly to handle collegiate esports and kind of the challenges in the industry today. And this is something that I've been really curious about. Having Carmen here, especially like being like kind of like a foremother of mine, kind of you were like the first to be a graduate from that collegiate esports scene from the student perspective. And I'm really curious kind of knowing like what has your story looked like as you've graduated and gone into the workforce? Like did you, like in terms of like what careers were available, like what do you think are maybe some advantages, but also maybe disadvantages of the time in which you were so new to this space and then kind of moving on and taking those skills into your current life?
I think for me, I have a different case from everyone else where I'm first generation, but I'm also like a student leader that really focused on growing the collegiate scene for Canadian university. And so there are already very limited opportunities in Canada at that time for esports. So I actually didn't go into esports or gaming right away after graduation. I worked full time with my family, and then I also pretty much did part-time with our UBC esports team for League of Legends. And you know, first generation, we have advantages in that we have a lot of first times. We can start. We have a blank canvas to start with, and we can do whatever we want. Think far and wide. Dream as much as we want, and not really be limited by what publishers want. But then if I were to if I had the option to change, if I want to be a part of a different generation, maybe the second generation, because I personally am really good at looking for areas of improvement and learning opportunities. So as a first generation, I left behind a lot of ideas that I've only started to plan. I got stakeholders on board with it, but I didn't get to execute it myself and with my team. And that's a bit sad for me, bittersweet. But as a second gen, I could pick that up and I can execute it, improve on it. And so if I had the option, I would want to be second generation. But if my case was a little bit different, I wouldn't mind being first generation if I was not a student. I would have loved to be in a position within a company that can provide the support and resources that collegiate needs. But as a first-gen student, like I mentioned before, I always felt like I had to be pulling these resources from these companies and spend a lot of time reaching out and persuading them. And yeah, before Twitch Student was a thing, I remember back in 2013, I reached out to Twitch actually and introduced them to UBC Esports. Hey, we're a collegiate organization. Can we get a team page? At that time, even think team pages was like something that other people use. It was mostly with like professional esports organizations, and
Yeah, we kind of hijacked that. We kind of hijacked that,
Yeah.
the Collegiate Squad.
Yeah. So then later on, Twitch Student came aboard, and all the collegiate clubs now get their own team pages. And so back then, I already had the idea that Twitch would be a perfect place to showcase and open up the collegiate scene. So that's an advantage of being a first gen, having all these ideas that haven't happened yet. But then also, as a student at that time, I didn't have enough time to really fully execute everything.
Yeah. Speaking on the other side, because Carmen, we were working together, and I could feel the frustration of can we just get this done? So I think from the publisher side, I'm really glad that I was working on collegiate law when I was, because I think it was the perfect time. And I was really lucky that I had leadership that really believed in the program, and specifically on the community side, because we had, when collegiate really took off, my boss was Guy Costantini, who's now at Skydance, and my director, his boss, was Ilya Rotelli, who launched Wizards' organized play program for Magic the Gathering. Mm-hmm. So they really understood grassroots competitions, grassroots communities, that weekly gathering. And so that we were able to really work a lot of things up the chain and get a lot of support that I don't know if we would be able to get as easily today. I think that it would have been much more hardcore competition focused, very esports focused, and something that I have to correct people a lot, because people go, oh yeah, so how'd you get into esports? And I'm like, well, I'm not an esports guy. I'm a community guy, and I got hired to be a community coordinator. The collegiate program was not an esports program because esports didn't exist back in 2011 the way that it is now, right? It really kind of was, it was still very amateur, grassroots, a bunch of different tournaments. I think StarCraft was probably it was like StarCraft and Counter-Strike were the two major professional organizations, but League of Legends wasn't the esports juggernaut that it is today when I started at the company. So when we were looking at collegiate, it was a community program that was organizer driven and really focused on those grassroots events. So I think that collegiate law would look very different. And I think it's already kind of starting to hedge in that direction a little bit, but thankfully the foundation's already set. So the student network is there and the student network is strong. So kind of to your point, Carmen, I completely agree. I think it would, back when I was leading the program, I think that y'all probably had the hardest job, and I'm really grateful for all the hard work that you did. But I think that I'm really grateful that I had a team and management that really believed in what we were trying to do and was able to provide the kind of support that we were able to provide. And honestly, I don't know if we would have gotten to do the stuff that we did back then nowadays in terms of the budget and in terms of the overall support that we were able to plug in, particularly with like the event by event support. So I'm really grateful for that. Only disadvantage was tech was brutal to try and get, and we were on Facebook even like 4 or 5 years into it. So that's the one disadvantage, I think, is that we didn't have a technology portal and we didn't have a home where y'all could self-organize and it could have scaled very quickly. I really wish that had existed, because we solved that with people. We had a dedicated full-time person just getting clubs in and just getting people their events and their prizing, and that just doesn't scale. So that was the one disadvantage of being really early, is we didn't really have the technology to rocket boost it to the moon, which I feel we could have if we had a little bit more technology support a little bit earlier. Yeah,
just super quickly on the league side, since we've heard from clubs and publishers. On the league side, I think one of the big differences now as compared to a decade ago or almost a decade ago, like Jaws mentioned, is there is definitely a much bigger emphasis on sort of like professionalization of leagues and tournaments. And I think that there's good and bad things to that. For example, one of the most fun events that I was at, and that I know for a fact that many people who are very sort of big in esports right now. Their first ever gaming event they went to was the UC Irvine Regional LAN that we did at CSL in 2012. And that was literally just like a bunch of, like, we had 18 schools from SoCal, NorCal, Nevada, Arizona, drove down to Irvine, and we just hung out in the ballroom, and we set up computers, and we just played a StarCraft 2 tournament. And it was just super grassroots and fun, and there was no sort of pressure or particular expectations on, quality of production or anything like that. And there are definitely much higher standards of professionalism now, because a lot of publishers are sort of adopting esports, and they're sort of using their professional production experience to sort of build really high scale events, and that didn't really exist back then. So I think that's the nature of competition, at least, has changed a little bit. And I don't think it's necessarily good or bad. It's just sort of like how the community has shifted. And I think just people in general today should be cognizant that there are sort of two roads in the collegiate space. There's still the grassroots, very, very community focused side, because I think the cool thing about college, and why I love college so much, is that no matter how professional it gets at the top level, the lower level is always going to be like very grassroots. So I think there's space for that to exist, but that's definitely, the norm on the competition side now, is to always try to be this sort of like big high level production. And 10 years ago, it was much more just like, hey, let's just go set up computers in an empty space ballroom and play a tournament. So that just the nature of competition in collegiate, I think, has shifted pretty dramatically.
I'll do it really quickly. I'm super happy that I'm first gen in Twitch that did something like this, because I didn't have to listen to internal KPIs or anything. I had a vision, I had a dream, created the program to create a sustainable future, increase professionalism, solve problems by giving opportunity to students through education. So this was always my goal, is to use gaming for good. Love esports, love competition. You know what I love more? Opportunity for young people. Create new leaders, empowered, enfranchised, confident, educated. That was my whole goal. So I didn't have to kowtow to corporate politics or KPIs. I came out, as long as I could feed my tiger, which absolutely I can. I could do anything within our space, at least for students.
Yeah, that is so. We are thankful for you. Speaking as a student or a former student, that is what I want to see happen more of. So, yeah, I just want to add on, like, not having Discord, and that was very difficult. But like back in the day. But I do want to say I will not miss trying to set up LAN events with no existing facilities, trying to change a sports stadium or a conference room into like a dream hack. So those are some challenges from Gen 1 I do want to say I don't miss. But I do want to get around to questions. I think that's the most value that all of you can offer by being a veteran of the space. So the first question that we have right here is, I'm a program director who is doing curriculum development right now, and I'd love to chat with you about using esports as an education platform. So not necessarily a question, but I do want to turn it into one. Does anyone want to speak to kind of how does education play into esports today?
So if I might jump in with that, this is what I love to do. I love to work with universities and high schools on curriculum. And again, the kind of curriculum we're looking at isn't just like esports. I'm not very fond of esports specific classes. I like to tag that on at the end, but it's marketing in emerging new and digital media through gaming and esports, business in digital media through gaming and esports. So this is what we try to do is, if there's a discipline and there's an application to digital media, it should have one semester that you can learn specifically through the community that's being built up through the esports program. Why is that? When that student graduates, they will have a portfolio that shows that they're not a recent graduate and an individual contributor. They're a young professional with 5 or 6 years of experience. Why? whatever they're learning in class and applying to the esports program, they put on their portfolio. It's not a school project anymore. There's qualitative and quantitative data behind it, right? It shows inputs, outputs, contributions, and results. Boom, done. So I'd love to help you. Reach out to me, Garvey.
If no one else has something to add to that, I will just say that I believe what Garvey said was correct. So I see esports as the vehicle for learning. I don't see it as kind of like the be all end all. So instead of like focusing on like an esports degree or like an esports class, I think it's really helpful to use esports and all the different things that live within it. Production, right? Media, digital media, managing a team, competing, like all these different aspects of the industry can then lead to a lot of ways for people to learn and develop in the ways that they are talented and skilled and interested in. So that's kind of the approach I see for that end of things.
Yeah.
Even a tax class that teaches the difference between royalty and income. Like we need tax accountants that understand what influencing is and where money comes in and how money goes out.
It's a big other conversation for sure. Yeah, Carmen?
Yeah, I just wanted to add on that, like all the jobs that I had after graduation, except for working with my family, I got them because of my experience in esports. My degree didn't really have anything to do with it, but because of the experience I had with building up UBC Esports and competing or managing a competitive team, that brought value to the companies that hired me after grad.
Yeah, and I see.
Cool.
Yeah, talking about. Do you want to?
No. I mean, no. I think everyone said pretty much what I was going to say anyway, so it's all good.
Yeah, I was gonna kind of shift things a little bit to our next question about publisher support. So, as the ecosystem is shifting from favoring publisher support over the grassroots initiatives that we're very familiar with, what are your thoughts on publishers barring grassroots efforts in favor of their own programs, essentially pushing out the growth of students to the curb?
So I'll just kind of jump in here. I think the short answer is I think it's unsustainable, and I think that it stifles innovation. That's kind of the quick answer is right now, and the kind of the longer answer to that is when publishers are IP holders. So let's just zoom out real quick, right? Publishers are the IP holders. So unlike football, baseball, basketball, nobody owns those sports. No family is claiming, I own basketball and thus I get to decide how people play and what they do. That's not true with video games. So if Riot arbitrarily wants to do anything with League of Legends, they have every legal right now in terms of how IPs are set up. So right now what they're doing, the strategy they're doing, I think a couple other organizations are centralizing as well. They're well within their rights as the IP holders to do what they believe is best for their IP and their brand. The consequences of doing that are you are killing your professional pipeline because people get their start running amateur events. And the only way to get your start doing that is if the events are sustainable enough that you can do them over a long period of time. The other issue is that you are potentially boxing out a marketplace in favor of centralizing profits. So I think a lot of times we're seeing orgs basically partner with one organization straight up, and they're like, all right, we're gonna partner really directly with you. And I think that also cuts off accessibility. And that's honestly the bigger issue that I have is the inability for anybody to be able to walk to a local LAN center and do a tournament, or walk to their student club and do a tournament, because I feel like it makes the industry and the ecosystem better. Having those in-person interactions, those local in-person interactions, makes the community better. It improves, speaking of recent events, it improves player behavior because there's accountability, and it allows for people, to Carmen's point, to grow their skills in a low pressure environment, right? You're not getting thrown right into the fire and having to do like a massive national event. I've done that. I had to do that. I had like 6 weeks of prep, and then they're like, all right, go shoutcast a bunch of professional events, right? That's terrifying and is not a good way to set people up to succeed. The way that you set them up to succeed is with amateur events scaled so that they can grow their local footprint. Then they can start growing their regional footprint. Then they grow their national footprint, North American, global. And that's how you grow as a person and as a professional. But you're not going to be able to do that if those events don't exist. So I think that it's a short-term, probably like, oh, this looks really good in the short term, but I think long term, it's really going to hamstring growth of the game. And I'm hoping that there are other publishers that pop up, see this opportunity, jump on it, and really reshape the way the ecosystem is going directionally.
Yeah, I can speak to that as well. From a third party perspective, obviously, I'm running CSL for 10 years. I worked with Riot for several of the years of the NACC and then ULOL and then CLOL and then all of a sudden not working with them at all. So I can definitely speak to it from that perspective, that I agree with you like wholeheartedly that sort of this ownership and like centralization of the entire ecosystem at one focal point is not good and sustainable. And the other thing too is, there are so many people that are trying to make it in this industry, whether they be individuals or third-party organizations such as CSL, and those people have every right to try to make something of themselves, and they contribute, I think, very valuable things to the growth of the game. Essentially, a third-party org who wants to do an event for a particular game, that's essentially free marketing. And so you're really expanding the base of players and providing additional opportunities, which is good for people who want to be competitive. It's good for people who want to learn sort of job and career skills. So there's so many benefits to it. I think the downside is, and what I've heard from Riot, for example, not necessarily trying to speak for them, but what I've heard from Riot in terms of explanations for why these things are the case is quality control and making sure that the experience is of a certain quality standard that players of that game expect from that game. So I do understand that perspective, but I think that there's a way to arrive at that level of quality collaboratively, as opposed to just like essentially saying like, we don't trust you guys to do this, so we're just going to do it ourselves. I can say, at my role right now at Faceit, we are actually working with a publisher, and I'm being essentially tasked with building a collegiate program for a publisher, and I'm taking a lot of my own experiences, because I have been on the side of being a third-party organization who's been blocked from doing stuff. And so I'm taking that into account in at least the recommendations that I'm making to the publisher for how to establish this program. One of the big things from my standpoint is like, okay, let's build a program that allows third-party organizations, leagues, events to thrive and be supported. So I am actively working on that in my new professional capacity. And then super quickly, the lawyer in me actually disagrees that publishers can prevent people from doing events. I wrote a paper on this, which was published. So I would recommend anyone who's interested in IP law and cares about this issue to read it, because I actually do think that, like, if push comes to shove, like a third-party org can tell a publisher, like, go ahead and try to stop me, and I don't think a publisher can in many instances. But that's a very, very big and like
I would
separate
like
topic.
that paper. I would like that paper.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, I will send you the link. I spent like 3 years researching and writing this thing. It was a super off topic, I guess it's on topic, but
Oh, that's super on topic. Please.
So
I wonder what the impetus was to that.
It's a
chat also asked for it.
It's a topic that I have thought about for a long time, and I thought about it, and then I started doing research for it actually when I was in law school, and then I finally got around to finishing it, and it was published last year. But yeah, I'll send you guys a link. There is okay, I don't want to railroad this, but there is actually a court case going on right now in which it's an unrelated court case, but involving actually Epic Games suing some guy who made like Fortnite hacks and was putting YouTube videos up on them. But the judge in this case actually referenced some of the cases that I had found in support of my argument and briefly like mentioned this topic in that. So it might be something that actually gets legal attention sometime in the next year or two. So anyways, it says this is like literally a topic that I'm super into from a professional standpoint. All right, I will stop now and let this.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for sharing that. And I do think that I do want to give a chance for everyone to kind of shout out the stuff you're working on. So you kind of touched on that already, but we do have a couple of minutes and then we'll be moving on to our next panel. But before we do that, if the other three panelists can as well, just share kind of the stuff that you're working on right now, anything you're excited about in like a couple of sentences. Let's start with, Carmen.
Yeah, sure. I'm currently doing freelance marketing and started live streaming on Twitch recently. And I've been participating in mentorship programs, both as a mentor and a mentee. It's my first time. I mean, like we talked about disadvantages and advantages of first gen, and I feel like one of the disadvantages was everyone was trying to learn together, and there wasn't really a mentor-mentee relationship established. No, there weren't programs like these before. So definitely recommend that. And for those who haven't checked out ICG, and they're the ones running a mentorship program for esports right now. And so I'm participating in that. And I am looking to join a company soon. I'm in the middle of an application process, and I'm super excited about that. So if you want to keep up to date, my Twitter, it's CHIYEUK. That's all.
Garvey, what are you up to?
It's the same old. We're expanding internationally. Currently, the Twitch student program is in 26 countries. So we're trying to organize pan-regional tournaments, like we have the University Esports Masters in Europe. We have a new portal coming out. So if you just Googled Twitch student, it would bring you to our Twitch landing page for the student page. But by the end of the year, it's going to be completely revamped, and it's going to have a lot of free stuff on it. A lot of information, and we're going to have a ton of internships. So that should be done by the end of the year, but you can check out the program now if you just Google Twitch student.
I guess I'll go next. So I have recently taken a position running publishing productions, so a combination of operations, a little bit of people management, and a lot of project management. So at a new startup called Batafox Studios, we are in the closed beta for a game called Super Squad, which is a MOSH. It's a multiplayer online shoot 'em up. So take all the fun parts of a shoot 'em up and then throw in MOBA abilities and characters, and then add in a little bit of RTS where you have to control two different characters at once. So we're really excited about that. We're just kind of getting off the ground, and I will happily shamelessly plug the beta key sign up if you guys want to get involved. And yeah, that's what I've been focusing on. I'm really excited, and it's the reason why a lot of this stuff is near and dear to my heart, especially talking about the publisher stuff, is we're going to be a free-to-play game, and free-to-play games are built on community grassroots. So just really want to kind of stay true to that and make sure that, as we're growing and as the game is growing, we're doing it in a collaborative fashion, because if history tells us anything, the best and most successful free-to-play games come from a very tight relationship with the community, because the community makes it go.
Yep, agree with that. On my end, yeah, I just started at Faceit pretty recently. I left CSL to come over to Faceit. I mentioned I am working with a publisher on establishing an official collegiate program for a game that currently does not have one. So I've been spending a lot of time on that. Super excited to get that going within the next month. But in addition to that, one thing that I'm super excited about at my role, Face It is a very global company. And Garvey, I do have some stuff to talk to you about, but I do.
Those guys, man, I love them so much.
Yeah. So I am planning on establishing some international collegiate stuff. Like Garvey mentioned earlier, we did this back in 2013 with the Azubu Collegiate Championship. Jaws was part of that, as well as was Carmen, and that was one of the most fun times I had in many respects, but also one of the most challenging in many respects. But I am hoping to work on some international collegiate stuff. Yeah, there's gonna be a lot of stuff coming out of Face It soon.
Let's go, Duran. I got another 20 countries lined up for the next year.
Excellent. Yeah, ready for it.
All right, well, thank you so much to our panelists. This has been a trip down memory lane, and it sounds like there's a lot of goodies that you all want to share in the Discord server. So we have like a legal document, we have IGCN to join, we have beta keys or beta sign up. So yeah, definitely if you want to connect with our panelists, please join if you haven't the Uconnect Uconnect events server, and we will continue our conversation there. But up next, we do have a discussion around mental health, so I'm looking forward to that. Just thank you so much, and thank you to Uconnect for having us.
Cool. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.